All right, thank you for the introduction, and for, I guess I want to thank everybody, or thank the organizers of the conference for the opportunity to afford the graduate students the opportunity to kind of get ourselves out of just presenting at the Midwest meeting and come and give a presentation to what's perhaps a different set of people, set of thinkers, get exposed to new ideas. So the presentation, the topic is the effects of birth weight and colostrum intake on piglet survival and quality. And so I'll start with a little bit of background information that's perhaps pretty well known by most folks, is that the sow's uterine capacity is limiting to both litter size and to individual piglet development. So as we continue to select, as we continue to experience greater litter sizes, what we end up doing is creating a situation of a decreased or a limited prenatal investment in each fetus, right? And so this creates problems because these smaller birth weight pigs are at a disadvantage compared to their heavier birth weight contemporaries. And so you can really see the effects of this. This is a pretty busy graph, and so I'll break it down. You can really see the effects of this through the average sow farm productivity from 2005 to 2010. And this data is adapted from two sources. One from Knauer and Hostetler, a publication in the Journal of Swine Health and Production in 2013, as well as Dr. Stalder's pork industry productivity analysis that's published annually for the National Pork Board. And so what we have here on the horizontal axis is the years increasing from 2005 to 2015. The piglets per litter is plotted on the primary vertical axis, and the two bars, the blue and the red bars, these represent the average number of total pigs born per litter for that year and the average number of piglets weaned per litter for that year, respectively. But we also have the black line, and this is plotted on the secondary vertical axis, and this is the average pre-weaning mortality for the same year, right? So it's pretty easy to start to see trends, see an increase in the total pigs born, and there is an increase in the number of pigs weaned for each year going from 2005 to 2015. But at the same time, that black line representing pre-weaning mortality is increasing as well. Now the data starts to get a little bit off kilter there in 2013, 2014. We know the cause of that was PED, but doesn't take away from the very obvious trends that we're experiencing in the U.S. So this is a graph. This is data that is actually from the mid to late 90s. This was producer-reported causes of piglet mortality, representing about 30 sow farms in Denmark. And so you can go around the pie graph. These are, again, producer-reported causes of mortality. So scours, 10%. Lameness, about 2%. Crushing is a very large majority. Respiratory was about 0. Disease, about 4%. Stillborns, a large percent. And then 18% starvation and low viability. So again, I'll be quite clear, this is producer-reported. It didn't go through a diagnostic lab. But there's a couple takeaways from the data, and I think there's a couple points that still have value there. The first is the large percentage of stillborn piglets. This isn't really super related to my presentation. I suspect that number is perhaps pretty inflated. Again, with it being producer-reported causes of death, I suspect that most folks were coming in and seeing a dead piglet at the back of the crate and assuming that it was a stillborn. I think that actually you could take a pretty good slice of that pie and put it over towards starvation and low viability. But the second takeaway is that if you remove stillborns from the equation, you only focus on the piglets that were born alive, we're losing piglets, and again, during situations where you're not experiencing a really extreme disease outbreak, you're losing piglets because of crushing and low viability. But really, the way that I think of crushing, and some folks may agree or disagree, but the way that I think of crushing is, yes, it's the act that causes the pig, but I don't really like to think of it as the cause of death. I think that to consider piglet mortality, you need to think of what's causing the piglet to be huddled so close to the sow. And so there you really boil down to the causes of piglet mortality, at least in my book, being hypothermia and hypoglycemia. So hypothermia, we know the piglet has a pretty extreme environmental change right there at birth, where it goes from the warm uterus into the much colder farrowing room. And even though the heaters are on in the farrowing room, it's still about a 20-degree Fahrenheit difference. The baby pig is born wet, has a large surface area to body mass ratio, so all of these things predispose the piglet to radiative heat loss. The piglet, unlike other farm species, the piglet does not have thermogenic brown fat, and so therefore the piglet's means of staying warm is shivering. But this is quite energy expensive, and so it lends itself towards hypoglycemia. The pig has a little bit of white adipose tissue. The majority of the white fat in the pig is not really subcutaneous, though, so it's not very insulating. And also, it's mostly structural in nature, so it's not very mobilizable for use as an energy source. So really what the piglet has for energy right after birth is glycogen, both in the liver and in the muscle. This is, present just a little bit, this is a paper that came out of Denmark in 2011. And what the researchers from Denmark had done in 2011 was they took these pigs right after birth and they fasted them. So they deprived them of colostrum intake. And what they ended up finding was that the glycogen that is stored in the liver and stored in the muscles, obviously the piglet uses it right away after birth. And with with low birth weight piglets, their organs are smaller, so proportionally they have a smaller glycogen pool from which to draw from. And so what the researchers had found was that there was fatal depletion of glycogen within 16 hours of birth. And so it wasn't always necessarily that the piglets had died at 16 hours, but at that point they figured that the piglet had lost so much glycogen that it was no longer ambulatory and able to get to the sow. And so the way that you can think about it is that the baby pig has like a 16-hour battery life, and so you have a very limited amount of time to get the pig plugged in to the sow and recharge that battery. And so that kind of collectively led us to our objective, which was to quantify the importance of piglet birth weight and colostrum intake on survival, weaning weight, and future performance. And I think a lot of this should be perhaps obvious to some folks. Colostrum is important for the pigs, but what we'll attempt to do is really quantify those numbers. So this study, it was conducted at the North Carolina Department of Agriculture's Vernon James Tidewater Research Station in the town of Plymouth. And in the study, there were 61 second parity landrace by large white sows. We monitored the sows continuously during farrowing, so we were there prior to, and we had 24-hour observation. We caught every piglet that came out as it was born. We caught the pigs, dried them off, we weighed them prior to first suckle, and we gave them an individual notch in one ear so we could identify that pig later on. As I mentioned, we measured birth weight prior to the first suckle. We measured the piglet weight again when the average age of the litter reached approximately 24 hours. We weighed the pigs again at 21 days to get a weaning weight. And then from the data, we were able to calculate a colostrum intake using the variables of birth weight, 24-hour weight change, as well as the duration of suckling. And so really quickly, the statistics were analyzed using the PROC GLM and logistics in SAS. We did include stillborns into piglet survival data. Our percent of stillborns was pretty low. We were about 3.2%. I think that could be attributed to we were just there when they came out, and so we were able to rescue piglets that were at risk. But piglet was the experimental unit for this study. So this is briefly some summary statistics. Average birth weight 1.15 kilos, weight at 24 hours 1.26, 411 gram colostrum intake, 5.32 kilos weaning weight, and survival at 24 hours and 21 days was 94.7 and 83.8% respectively. So this graph, I'll set it up very quickly. We have piglet birth weight on the horizontal axis on the bottom, piglet mortality there on the vertical. And what we see is a curvilinear association between birth weight and piglet survival. So increasing birth weight, that pig was more likely to survive to weaning. This makes sense. Similarly, we also discovered a curvilinear association between colostrum intake and survival. And so again, colostrum intake plotted on the horizontal. And this is actually quite interesting because you can look at the data and you can see almost where the line drops down to just about zero, really indicating the importance of a colostrum intake and the ability of that baby pig to survive to weaning. There's an R-squared value of 0.28. Similarly, this is a linear association between birth weight and weaning weight. Again, perhaps no surprise, increased birth weight was associated with greater weaning weights, such that actually a 1 kilogram increase in birth weight was associated with a 2.8 kilogram increase in weaning weight. And then we found much the same here with colostrum intake, with a linear association. As the piglet consumed greater colostrum within the first 24 hours of life, that piglet had an increased weaning weight with an R-squared of 0.38. And so that kind of led us towards our second objective. What we did with this is we took a subset of piglets from that study. So we used 448 piglets, and we grouped them into pens in a 2x2 factorial according to their birth weight and colostrum intake, low and high birth weight and low and high colostrum intake. And so we did this actually, we missed taking feed efficiency data and feed intake data on the nursery period. So this study started at when the average piglet age, or when the average pig age was 74 days of age, and then ended when the average pen weight reached 120 kilograms, or about 265 pounds. And we did record average daily gain, average daily feed intake, we measured feed efficiency, as well as the age at market. And so down here in the table, there's a little bit of descriptive summary statistics about the pigs, the groups that they were in. So you can see between the low birth weight and the low gain pigs, about 0.93 kilos at birth, and then 43 grams of weight gain within the first 24 hours, and so on and so forth. And so this graph, I'll set it up quickly. What we have 4 bars represented, and going from left to right, the 4 different groups. So low birth weight, low gain, low birth weight, high gain, high birth weight, low gain, and then high birth weight and high gain within the first 24 hours. And then our trait of interest is there plotted on the vertical axis. And so this is the body weight at 74 day of age, and already you can see pretty stark differences in those groups of pigs, even just at 74 day of age. And what I think you'll start to notice a trend in the forthcoming slides that I hope you'll probably pick up on. The low birth weight, low gain pigs generally are going to do the worst. The high birth weight, high gain are going to do the best. But what's perhaps interesting to focus on is those high birth weight piglets that don't do well immediately after birth. You're going to lose a lot compared to their contemporaries that did have an increased rate of gain in the first day. And similarly, those low birth weight pigs that have good colostrum intake, you can almost rescue those. Excuse me. You can almost rescue those and kind of increase their production and restore a little bit of their genetic potential for growth. This is the average daily gain. Again, the 4 groups, and so you see an increase going from the low birth weight, low gain of 1.05 kilos up to the high birth weight, high gain at 1.12 kilos average daily gain. Average daily feed intake, lowest in the low birth weight, low gain, highest in the high birth weight, high gain, and then intermediary in the middle 2. There was no difference in the feed efficiency between the high birth weight pigs. However, we did have a little bit of feed efficiency come back in the low birth weight pigs that had a higher rate of gain. And then finally, in the days to market, again, you see similar trends where the low birth weight, low gain pigs were on feed for the longest, and then proceeding downwards towards the high birth weight, high gain pigs. And so collectively what these things indicate is that these early in life traits, not just birth weight, but how well that pig gets started and how much colostrum it's able to consume within the first day of life, are very positively associated not just with its ability to survive to weaning and grow to weaning, but they're positively associated with future performance in the finisher as well. And so you can make very small investments early in life that could potentially pay out larger dividends later in life. And so I'll try my best to answer questions as completely as possible, but for those interested, we haven't published yet in academic journals, but we do have a couple national hog farmer articles, and so can potentially look those up and perhaps learn more about the studies and how they were designed. So lastly, I thank the North Carolina Pork Council, the NCDA, as well as some of our colleagues at NC State University for their funding and labor support.